So thank you very much. It's very nice to have this panel discussion. We will try to make simple something that actually it's very difficult. And it's to reflect on how to make this green transition also a just transition. And this is very clear if we focus especially on cities, because actually cities worldwide actually host most of the diversity, but also most of the inequality. And we know that actually cities are also the places where the green transition is actually in some way accelerating, but also where the green transition also deal with huge challenges. So today we will discuss about green and just transition in cities, and I have asked our panelists that I'm going to present in a very short time to reflect about three important dimensions of justice that actually are recognized as important pillars of justice when we are dealing with the green transition. And the first one, of course, is the distribution and redistribution of environmental goods and beds in cities. Some of them have been already anticipated, no? So the distribution of green areas, but also of pollution in the city is not equal. Then there are some populations that are suffering much more about pollution in some areas of the cities, and some populations that are more privileged and can enjoy more environmental resources. There is an issue related to the recognition of diversity. It means that there are these challenges, but also needs to recognize different approaches to sustainability according to different background of our population. And least but not least, a need of participation. So how can we involve all the citizens, especially the most marginalized, the citizens that, for example, are not involved in politics, but for different reasons, because they can't vote, for example, or because they don't want to be involved. How can we try to do our best to involve everybody in this green transition? So we have invited three panelists today. I start in alphabetical order. We have Thomas Berman, who is CEO at So Central in Norway. And Thomas is passionate about speeding up the sustainable transition of our cities, while at the same time strengthening our democracy. And this is already the question of his work. Why bringing in this in the political aspect? Because the key to sustainable and just society is getting more people involved and how we develop and run our cities. His company, So Central, is also working on democratic innovation project and has been instrumental in introducing citizen assemblies in Norway. We have Helene Figari. She's a sociologist and researcher at the Norwegian Institute for Natural Research, NINA. She specializes in exploring human-nature relationships and the dynamic of environmental conflicts. Her current research interests include the management and use of urban nature, with a particular focus on urban environmental justice. And we have Hege Hofstad. She's political scientist and senior researcher at NIBR at Oslo Met, with sustainability governance as key interest. Her most recent projects and publication explore local social sustainability, just transition, climate leadership, and the building of sustainable transformative capacity. A common denominator of these issues is collaborative form of governance as a crucial element. So we have a very few minutes to discuss this important issue, and I know, mission impossible, but please, starting from Thomas. In 3-4 minutes, can you answer to this very difficult question, actually? From your perspective and experience, what are the most pressing challenges and opportunities for advancing urban justice in the green transition?
Yes, thank you for that quite complex question. So my perspective, just before I share my thoughts on this, is very much Norway and specifically Oslo, but also Trondheim. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking a lot about Oslo, and but I think it is quite applicable to most cities, at least in Europe, and it comes down to how we make decisions and who's involved in making those decisions. So being part of the city development scene in Oslo for the last 10, 12 years, it's been quite interesting to follow how we've been talking about where do people get a say, how do they get involved, and there's a lot of discussion about how can we involve people more. But to be honest, I don't see that much progress. There's a lot of involvement, so asking people what they think about something, and then they're sort of left out of the room after that. It's a lot of input, but not really shared power or shared decision making. Just an example of this is Oslo has created 3 innovation districts, which is supposed to be, at least of my understanding, areas in the cities where we are to innovate and really try to change how we do things. So far it's been a very, the focus has been very much on technical aspects. So how do we build differently? So reuse building materials. How do we create environments for innovation so we can create more companies? But none of them has really included how do we make decisions in a new way. So for instance, the circular economy or the innovation district in Hofstad has been set up as a foundation, but with a very limited amount of partners involved. And all the partners are the large stakeholders who already has a lot of power in the city. And talking about this both to the municipality but also to the other stakeholders, their feedback is very much, yes, we want to include people, but not yet. And I think that's sort of my main point. It's about an opportunity, because there are a lot of people who want to be involved. Of course, they need knowledge first, but that's available if we give it to them in the right way. But it's really about how do we change the way we think about decision making in cities, make it more on the local level, and also include processes that are not only asking people to give inputs, but actually be part of also making the decision. So the other areas when it comes to just cities are equally important. But at the moment I'm really focused on the decision-making process, because all the right words are there. We talk about co-creation and in Norwegian samskaping and everyone should be involved, blah, blah, blah. But it's not really happening at the final level, which is actually sharing power.
Okay, thank you. Yes, in your presentation you were mentioning citizens' assembly. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, so citizen assemblies are something that has been going on for quite some years, especially in the Western world, but also elsewhere. It's nothing new. It's basically asking citizens to be involved in a panel. And the key aspect of a citizen assembly is you don't actually raise your hand and apply. You get an invitation and it's a random selection, so it's a lottery. But the lottery also adjusts for the population as a whole, so you get a reflection of the population in the panel. So actually just yesterday we had the first meeting of the first national citizen assembly called Citizen Assembly for Norway's Future, which is assembly initiated by the civil society organizations. And there were 66 people from all across Norway who's been selected through a process, and then they will get knowledge about the subject they're supposed to discuss. So it's not sort of asking them what do you think. It's first get knowledge, then you discuss together, and then you agree on what are the recommendations you agree on, and then give the feedback to the organizers or to the governments. So it's a slightly different process than we've seen in Norway before. It has been done on local level, and now the first 2 national citizen assemblies are in progress. It's not a silver bullet, but I think it's an example of how can we think in new ways about involving people, not only as what do you think, but please give us your recommendations or even be part of making decisions.
Thank you very much. So the idea is to try to bring participation at a higher level, no? Not just information, not only consultation, but more participation, involvement for this. Thank you very much. And now, Helene, is your... Yes, same question, small question.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
Yes, 3 minutes. I was just thinking, must be a very short message, and maybe in contrast to you, I would say that would be like, I think there's no expression in English that is the equivalent of the Norwegian or kaste inn en fakkel, throw in a torch, but I think I'll do that. And just say that I have been working so far mostly with distributive justice, the distribution of a good, and also has used Oslo as an example. So we have actually mapped the people's access to urban nature, water, green space, etc. in Oslo, and we have found that there are huge disparities. And to be very brief, it is especially connected to people's income. And we've found that the poorest people in Oslo live in the areas with the most pollution, the least access to green space, and also the farthest from the water. And then the question is, and this is a really important question, because of course I agree that participation is very important, and recognition too. Because if we take the point of view of an elderly person, for instance, living in a poorer part of the city of Oslo, and I should add also that the poorest area in Oslo are also the areas in which densification is the strongest. So these are the same areas in which green space is sacrificed currently. And so if there's an elderly person living there, of course, that person needs to be recognized as existing and also probably should contribute. But I feel that we aren't there yet, because there is absolutely no consciousness in planning processes in Norway about class differences or social differences in access, or very, very little interest. We're really behind in research and we're behind in planning. And I find that this is crucial. We need to be really aware of this. And I think we could compare this area of justice when we talk about justice as access, for instance, to nature, or as being exposed to pollution in cities. We could compare this to another area, for instance, access to higher education. And when we talk about access to higher education, you will find that you will have groups that, for instance, those with the least income, they will prefer not maybe to choose higher education. So what are you supposed to do with that? Well, what you're supposed to do as a politician is to give those people, of course, respect that choice, but give them the opportunity to have that access. And this is a lesson that we need when we talk about environmental justice, to understand in the area of urban planning. Because what it means is, it is a fact also, research has shown, for instance, from the United States, that people who are black, they have a lower preference for nature than people who are upper class or middle class white. So what should urban planners do with that? Should they avoid developing parks in areas with black people? It doesn't make sense. What makes sense actually is to give people the possibility. It is the possibility that should be equally distributed. And we know, if you think about it, think about Oslo as an example, and think about parks that we commonsensically consider as attractive, because there is some common sense and universality involved also in people's preferences and what they like to use. We have some really nice, attractive areas in Oslo, like Vitenparken, for those of you who knows the city. Big Day, we have Sognsvann, Ekeberg, all those areas are placed on the western side, or the socioeconomic western side of the city. And on the eastern side, you don't have anything of those similar to that. That is distribution, and I think we really need to start there, because the consciousness about this is very low today.
Thank you, Helene. I have a question for you, of course. But since Oslo is recognized as the green city, is really doing a lot of efforts to... I was wondering, the availability of green is increasing, and in the cities is increasing in a very equal way. There are, because we know this is a historical pattern, for example, in Oslo. Are things getting better?
When it comes to, we haven't really, we don't have any data on the development of green space over time, if that is your question. Because we would need to see that, how this develops over time, to see whether there is a pattern. In which areas of the city are the green spaces most rapidly disappearing? But we're trying to get that very soon. But what we do know is that there is a specificity of Oslo, and maybe we could find the same pattern in other Norwegian cities. We don't know this, but we often talk about green segregation. And when we talk about green segregation, we tend to focus on the poorest areas. But if you turn that around, and in Oslo, you look for the richest areas, we find a very interesting pattern. It is the richest areas, the clumping of people in very rich areas, that explains most of the disparities in access to green space in Oslo. So what this means in practice is that you will have very strong resemblances between people in rich areas and a bigger variety of people in the rest of the city. And these areas, it appears, tend to be super resistant to changes. So there is something really important there, to look into these rich areas, or the privileged areas, and look at how, probably during processes and involvement, people manage to protect their areas from the loss of green space, for instance.
Thank you. This recall very much also discussion about participation and involvement, and the differences also in Oslo between participation and involvement in trying to protect the green, or to increase the green at local level, but it's different from in different areas of Oslo. Thank you. And now it's your turn, Hege. Same Mission Impossible.
Yeah. Thank you so much. My points will emerge from two research projects that I've had recently. One is about local social sustainability, what it actually means at a local level. And we have engaged with a lot of different people in various communities. The other one is a project on climate protests. And climate protests, both from the, you could say, that are against a climate measure, not climate policies as such, but a climate measure such as densification or toll rings, but also protests that wants more climate politics, that want more ambitious policies. And building on these results, I want to emphasize first that when you talk about recognition of diversity, you often talk about marginalized people by ethnicity or age or those kind of things. But I think that maybe we lack values. And I think to criticize our own research, I think that we are not acknowledging that people have different values. We tend to think that when we involve people, they will come up with sustainability values. But that is actually not the case. People are different. Some hold sustainability values and some do not. or it's more nuanced than of course, dichotomy. But what I think is important to acknowledge also when developing sustainability policies is that for people, it is safety and belonging that are at the core of their heart, that they are very important to them. It is, if you look at a place, people are very preoccupied with the histories of the place, the activities going on there, the friends they have there. And when those values are challenged, like intensification, they react. And sustainability policies are not, have not been very good at including different kind of values when developing the policies. And I think that in especially the times we are in now, when we see growing backlash for climate policies, I think that is so important to start to expand the political processes to also engage with those that are cherish to drive car, that cherish, you know, low density living. So we need to do that more. And so the other thing I want to emphasize is that we have, like Thomas also touched upon, we have a political system that are really built upon reactive engagement, so that when you are confronted by a policy that touches upon your life, like your property, you have the right to react and to engage. But proactive engagement are not very developed. And I think especially to get into contact with people that are not organized in organizations or in political parties, you need to develop other kind of channels, because they will not use the ordinary political system. We have tried to engage with people that are often called silent voices, and the channels to people that often are not part of political processes are nearly non-existent. You need to go through, you know, teachers or something like that. It's quite difficult. But then you need to work more proactively, and I think, as Helene said, planning is not equipped for doing that kind of job as of now, not at all. So that is a big challenge, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. This is, I teach in the planning master here. And this is one of the most recurrent questions from students. Actually, how can we involve everybody and the most marginalized groups? And indeed, my impression is that for the moment, we are not equipped with the right tools. No? We wait that they come to us, but instead, the direction should be the opposite. We need to find a way to go to them. So, thank you very much for your inputs. And now, just to close, 1 minute each. Yes, can you tell us one single, the most important, actually, single urgent recommendation for policymakers and practitioners to ensure a just green transition?
I think I go for policymakers, not surprisingly, I think it's democratic innovation. As Hege said, you know, how do we get people engaged? Not when the decision has been made, or not just to give input, because I totally support the injustice of our city when it comes to green spaces. But also, I worked a lot in the eastern part of Oslo, and in those meetings where people meet, everyone wants more green areas. And then the large or the powerful policymakers and interest groups, they somehow decide that's not what's going to happen. And that means that we need to have a new democratic system, or we need not a new one, but we need to improve the system we have.
Thank you very much. Helene?
Yes, again, from a distributive perspective, I feel that there is danger in, not on behalf of research, but from a planet perspective, to use participation as a way to avoid the distribution question. We invite people to participate, so we don't focus on distribution anymore. So what I find really important, and I will use Oslo once again as an example now, is to go to the recognition dimension and recognize that there are groups like children and elderly in the city right now that are not considered when choices are made about the outdoor areas. And they need to be considered in all areas of urban planning. I will give you one example. Snow management. Just right now, it happened, we had a lot of snow, and actually the road where I usually go by bike was cleared, but the paths just outside where the kids are living weren't cleared, so they couldn't go to school. So this, and what about the elderly? So this needs to be mainstream. Why are people walking systematically not prioritized at the moment in Oslo? It's more important to accommodate for electrical bikes. You have electrical bikes in green space areas where kids can't walk anymore. This is really probably provoking to many people, but there are some dilemmas between climate mitigation and inclusiveness and making green space and outdoor areas accessible for some groups in society. That is, I find right now, the most important question of all.
Thank you, yes. And this is also very important if we think that we are going towards an aging city, aging society. So these issues are very, very important to recognize all the needs of the children, of the teenagers, where very often are excluded, but also the elderly we are getting there, actually. Thank you. Hege.
I think I will make a recommendation. Is there any politicians here at all? No? But I will make a recommendation. One? Okay. Yeah, great.
Cool.
What I've learned from the climate protest project that we had, which I think is quite interesting, is that the movements that was opposing climate policies, it was densification and it was restriction on car use through toll rings. What they experienced throughout, we studied this in Oslo, in Bergen, in Gothenburg, and in Sweden. All those movements, they felt that they were in the political process, manipulated and led astray. That was their experience. If you ask the politician, if you ask the administrators, I guess they would have another opinion, but that is not that important. The important thing is their experience of being manipulated, because they found it really hard to access the knowledge basis for the decisions, to follow the process, and also to know when and where decisions were taken. And I think that's quite a serious thing to reflect upon. I'm not sure if everybody, which is not part of the accepted policies, will feel it that way, but I think in either way it's very important to include people at an earlier stage. So that maybe it could be that some adjustments would make it more digestible, the policies that are proposed. So there is something there, and also the movements that want more ambitious climate policies. They also want earlier engagement for all. So everybody is into that kind of thing. But I think this is a lot about the trust towards politicians, but it's also about the legitimacy of policies. And it's so important these days because we are going to have both effective and just climate transition and sustainability transition. So we need to solve this in a way. Yeah.
I think we need to stop for now, but my impression is that it was very clear that the topic of justice in the green transition, it's a big one, and it's not easy at all. It's very complicated, but it's also the most necessary, because without the justice and inclusion, the green transition won't happen. So thank you very much for your time and your inputs, and I leave the floor to you.